Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I must say a great honor to share the program with Hank Greenberg, a true trailblazer in U.S.-China relations. Night before last, I was in Beijing at Tsinghua University at the Schwarzman College doing a screening of the film. And as they were guiding me to the auditorium, we passed the newly inaugurated Morris Greenberg dining room. So, Hank, I don't need to tell you this, but you're everywhere. 5 years ago, we embarked on a journey to make a different type of film about the U.S.-China relationship. It was based on a belief that the traditional channels of diplomacy were no longer working. All of the symmetry between the various leaders, the endless dialogues and salons, and the multiplicity of studies on U.S.-China cooperation had basically done very little to move the needle on the relationship. And I think a good part of the reason for that is that we've been putting the cart before the horse. We have neglected to invest in what I think of as the core infrastructure of the U.S.-China relationship, which is public opinion. George Washington said, "If you have public opinion on your side, you can do anything. Without it, you can do nothing." Only by dialing back anti-Chinese sentiment that exists here in the United States and anti-American sentiment that exists in China can we ever hope to achieve the full potential of the U.S.-China relationship. And maybe if we can turn the tide of public opinion, we can unleash the single most effective antidote to the so-called Thucydides trap by depriving leaders of the ability to act impulsively with impunity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that sometime over the next decade, the Chinese economy will surpass the U.S. economy in total size. Now, that is historically significant for at least a couple of reasons. For the first time in the modern era, the largest economy of the world will be a developing, not developed economy. And for the first time in the modern era, the largest economy of the world will come from a place other than the West. We decided to make this film not to retell that story. It is, after all, already the best-known geopolitical story out there, but because no one was telling the other side of the story. We spent the better part of 5 years looking for the voices and faces that gave body and soul to a feeling that something very basic was missing from the mainstream story. It is a story that the mainstream media has, for the most part, neglected. It is a story that political leaders on both sides have decided, for the most part, not to tell. And it is a story that I believe the Chinese people are too close to tell. The story is the untold story of the wider benefits that can be achieved by U.S.-China cooperation. It's also about the dark side of globalization for the Chinese people and the common humanity that binds us together. In the process of telling this story, which took over 5 years, we hit upon something quite unexpected. We began to tell the story of America, reconnecting with its core value of openness to others. And that openness, our cameras found, was occurring not in the so-called enlightened coasts of America. It wasn't happening here in New York or in my home state of California, but in the heartland of America. in flyover country, where ordinary Americans could be seen absorbing the highly contagious frontier spirit of visiting Chinese who had decided to look at some of America's most intractable problems as opportunities. So by looking through the lenses of ordinary Americans and ordinary Chinese who are seeking to bridge the physical and metaphysical distance that divides us, this film, I think, makes a major down payment on shattering the myths that Americans have about China and China has about America. Let's take a look at a preview.
What is so mysterious about China? If we get to know each other better, the mystery will disappear.
Look across the Pacific. China is becoming what we sort of imagine ourselves to be. People go to China to get a glimpse of the future now.
They take our money. They take our jobs.
There are some people in this country who would like to make China an enemy. I've always said about that, well, hell, the best way to find an enemy is to go looking for one.
但是他不要忘了，中国其实不是觉醒，中国是复兴啊。
You worry so much about the other guy wiping you out that you can have a war breaking out over nothing but mutual fear.
Diplomacy is like a game of billiards. Somebody thinks they're going to hit the ball and make it go into a pocket across the table. What it does instead is hit a lot of other balls along the way.
Making China an enemy is the greatest opportunity lost. It saddens me.
We were so curious about all things China, and he was so curious about all things America.
He was on the quiet side. They all generally are.
I want to make this house a window of Chinese culture.
I think that I can help you do that.
I didn't know anything about China. And I would say that they're my friends. I wouldn't just call them my coworkers because when I walk through the plant, I'm always saying, ni hao.
I love celebrating a culture that's 4,000 years old.
1, 2, 3, see ya!
It's kind of ironic that I had to come to China, and now I'm a coach, and I love it.
China is rapidly transforming from the world's largest factory to the world's largest market. This is the exact wrong time to be picking a trade war with China.
We are different people. We're proud people. In so many ways inextricably connected, and yet are also deeply suspicious of each other. It's like the world's worst buddy road trip comedy. And the question is, how do we get past that suspicion? How do we get to a point where we acknowledge all the things that we have in common?